Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're back on the second dev server for Updates Danger Zone. It's time to have a look at a new Japanese vehicle that is coming to the standard tech tree. This is the M36B2. It is another variant of the Slugger which is coming to the game. We have the standard one which is in the American tech tree, the good old M36 GMC that you can see here. This is probably the closest one to the Japanese one, the M36B2 having a slightly different gun compared to its American compatriots. This one has the M3 gun, whereas the Japanese one has access to the M3A1 gun. And then also you have the Italian stallion, the M36B1, which is obviously on the different chassis, which you can see here, but does have the same gun as the Japanese one. So the Japanese one comes into the tech tree in the tank destroyer line, so it comes between the Type 75 SPH and the NATO. It's also at rank 4, so it'll be useful for researching rank 5, 4, and 3, which is quite nice. They could have easily put this thing at rank 3, but they've decided to put it at rank 4, meaning that its usefulness is a little bit more than other vehicles. Everything about it, though, is kind of standard compared to the tank destroyer experience. At least I should say the turreted tank destroyer experience, because when you're just a casemate you have a few issues. But it has the 50 cal on top, it has the pretty box standard armor, which isn't going to stop anything at 5.7. Maybe the mantlet, which does have some weird ricochets on it every so often, will stop rounds, but generally you're just going to get pierced like butter, and your 5-man crew, 3 in the turret, 2 in the hull, are going to get annihilated by whatever comes in. It also has this wonderful ammo in the back of the turret, so super easy to kill when it comes to the vehicle with artillery and also just general overpressure mechanics. Another thing is it gets annihilated by CAS, so generally if I take this thing out, I'll take it out as a first spawn, so I don't have to deal with the massive CAS elements that are around. Because the 50 cal is nice to be able to deal with them, but it's not enough. It would be much better if there was, you know, a covered top, basically, a little bit of armor sheet just to stop the overpressure and just to make it so they don't go after the ammo every single time. The vehicle is 28 tons and is powered by a 500 horsepower engine. This actually gives pretty good mobility to the M36. Like, it's not an immobile tank. It's quite mobile. It plays much more like a medium tank than a general tank destroyer in that regard, and also has really good gun depression on it. So 10 degrees of gun depression and 8.6 seconds for the gun. The 90mm is not too bad, but you got to remember that is affected by the crew that I have since it's manually reloaded. It has access to a base reload of 9.75, and you can get it up to 7.5 seconds with an aced crew if you want to. But this vehicle in general is going to fill a nice little gap in the Japanese tech tree and also give Japan access to another American vehicle that they kind of desperately need. The mid-tiers of Japan have been lacking a lot of vehicles for a long time, and over the last year or so this really has been put into focus, but also pseudo-fixed with some additions. Obviously with the more Type 74s, the addition of the M47, the STA3 for example, and also other options such as the Chaffee, which has been there for a long time, but many others which are sat around in this tech tree. With the 5.7 edition of the M36B2, it means that now you can run the M4A3 with something, when before you couldn't, and then you can run in an AA or something, with also access to some pretty potent air superiority fighters to run alongside. So it just gives Japan another lineup and makes it a little bit easier to grind through, instead of having to focus on just having one vehicle in your lineup and trying to win from there. The M36B2 does get access to a bunch of different rounds, since it has the M3A1 cannon instead of the M3 one, gets access to a stock M318 shot, the APBC, which pens enough, but not enough if you get fully up-tiered and stuff like King Tigers, and also T-34s. It does get access to the M82 though, the standard 90mm round, which is super nice to use compared to a bunch of other ones that are in the game. It does get some 2 useless APCR rounds, which you have to research through to be able to get to the heat. Really like the fact that these are arrowed together, very similar to the M47. Pretty much you have to just research GAF to get the nice shell. And then also gets access to Heat FS, which pens 305, 264, 152, so you'll have no issues with being able to penetrate anything at that BR range. So overall, it's got decent firepower, which is good since it's a tank destroyer. It lacks some other things such as artillery, which would be really nice, and also some smoke grenades, but it does have a smoke shell. It's just really hard to load a smoke shell when, you know, your reload's about 10 seconds long, because generally you'll get annihilated by something else while your reload is going. Which is a bit sad. The other thing about this vehicle, which I'm sure will change, it doesn't have any camos. So it's just stuck with the stock one that you have access to here. But generally, you know, around these BRs, there are some camos for the Japanese vehicles. So for the M4A3, for example, it has all of these different camos, and I'm sure there'll be no different for the M36 since it survived the Japanese and was around the same time as this vehicle as well. So not really have to worry about that in general. But it's really nice and just lovely to see Japan get some stuff. What they've really seemed to focus on in the last few years when it comes to War Thunder is the addition of at least one vehicle per nation per update. And even if it is a vehicle which is an aircraft, or if it's a tank, or if it's a ship, or if it's a, you know, a helicopter or a bomber, at least they get something. And that's pretty much what you see with Japan this update. You get a standard M36, which is slightly different to the other 2 M36s which are in the game. It's more of a mixture of the Italian one and the American one in general. And you also get the Iron Army, which of course is a nice frigate. So even though, you know, many people may think that they are, you know, they're underrepresented when it comes to Japan, and, you know, a bunch of other tech trees aren't getting anything, every tech tree in the game right now, or every nation in the game I should say, maybe not tech tree, is getting something, which is what, you know, you should be kind of happy about. You can see even on the move the gun's pretty stable to use, like you can actually get pretty accurate shots of its stuff while moving around, and also the mobility of this thing is not bad. You can still push around at a decent click while trying to go after different enemies, so flanking is an opportunity, which can definitely happen. And I have a really good time in the standard M36. I have a really bad time in the M36B2 though, which is the Italian one, mainly because of the hull itself. The hull is a lot slower, and also it's a lot taller, so it's much easier to die in that thing. And generally also just you can't get around the battlefield as easily. Where in the standard slugger chassis and the upgraded gun, it just feels really nice to use, and I'm looking forward to spading this thing out for Japan. It is super nice to see as well at this second dev server compared to the first. We do have access to a bunch of more mid-tier vehicles. I was a little bit worried that it was going to be high-tier heavy when it came to the update, and it is high-tier heavy, but having more options at each tier, especially for the minor nations in ground like Japan, is always going to be something that I personally strive for. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Nicholas Richardson, Elove Goat, Pyman675, Winter Scientist, Merciless Reaper, Jerry Prevolt, Megadino King, Orange Tail, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Uncle Bean, Sem Arslan, Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.